Hello viewers, welcome back. We're going to continue with the Apple Mac restoration. If you've not seen the previous videos, go and check those out. They'll be in the video description or on a card that pops up over there somewhere. So we removed all the capacitors in the last episode, and I have just received a whole bag full of new capacitors. Crazy amount of different sizes and capacities in this in the Apple. It really was quite surprising. I think I counted 13 different types. So those have all arrived. So first off, we're going to install the new capacitors into the power supply for the Mac, and then we will tackle the actual main motherboard. Now the good thing about this one, it's all through hole, so it's really quite easy to do. Shouldn't take long at all. Right, so we'll start off with the largest one. Right, so everything is soldered in there. I'm just going to do a visual check, make sure everything is in the right place and is the right way round. So I'm just going to do that off camera, and I'll snip off all the leads as well, and then we can reassemble. Right, so we should be able to plug this in, turn it on, and get some kind of output. It's probably unlikely we're going to get the actual proper voltages because there's no load on it. So, yeah. I was just wondering why the voltage was negative. I've got my leads around the wrong way. What an idiot. Right, so we've got 5 volt, bit unstable, but that's fine. There's no load on it. We've got 12 volt and -5. Bit all over the place, but to be expected. So that's fine. Okay, so that's all the power supply done. Next step is to put the caps back on the actual motherboard. Okay, I've just had a quick look over the board just before I started, and I've just spotted on C14 here. It's actually a bit of the pad. It's been slightly eaten away a little bit by the leaking capacitor, and it's just created a little spot on the pad where the solder probably isn't going to want to take. So this bit is okay. So what I'm going to try and do is just install this capacitor just slightly to the right, just so it allows me to solder onto this part here rather than just here. So a little bit tricky, but should be able to do it. There's usually enough length either side to move it around a little bit. So. Okay, so that's all the capacitors successfully soldered on. Not too bad. I changed my technique a couple of times, but they weren't that much of a problem. Interesting cap, this one, because the pad that it actually installs into is a surface mount pad, and it has through hole. So interesting that they'd obviously planned that they might have needed an extra big capacitor in there. Indeed, they've gone for a massive 2200 capacitor in there. So I've noticed on the other machine that I have, it doesn't have that there. It actually has a surface mount one. So this is possibly a little modification that they did once production started. So yeah, we just need to reassemble this and power it on and see what happens. Right, so let's just assemble everything back together. I've already cleaned the case. That has come up pretty well. There's just a few little marks that don't seem to want to come off. So, but apart from that, it's very clean. It looks almost brand new, to be honest. The rubber feet, they're still intact. Yeah, it's all in really, really great condition. So I'm really happy with this. So we'll just reassemble the fan and speaker assembly. Right, so that's the speaker and fan assembly put back together. I'm going to modify this after it's all up and running, because this is easy to take out anyway. So I'll put the battery holder in. Probably one of the last jobs to do, so I'll save that for later. And of course we need our Mac ROMs installing, so let's do that next. Okay, so that's the ROMs installed, so the Mac now has its memory back. And so next step is just to install the RAM. I've just removed the VRAM module just to give me access in here. So we've just got some old school 30-pin SIMs. It's surprising how hard these are starting to get hold of. It used to be you just used to throw these away. Not anymore. That's the 2 memory and then the VRAM module. There we go. Next we have the hard disk power cable, SCSI cable, and the floppy drive. Obviously this is untested, but hopefully that does work. So it just clips into place, and then that just plugs in there. Excellent. Right, so I think we're good to power it on. Right, let's power this on and see what happens. Not entirely sure if I'm going to get video, because I'm not sure whether this monitor can run at the frequencies that the Apple runs at. So might hopefully just get the little Apple bong that you get when you power it on. If that's the case, then I'll have to see if I can find some other way to get a display. Well, that's a very good sign. And yeah, my monitor is saying out of range. Yeah. Right, well, great news. So instead of running the Mac directly into my monitor, I've actually run it through one of my video scalers. So that's rescaling the Mac output to 1280 by 1024, so my monitor can display it. So great news is we got a picture, it looks fine, everything seems to be good. So I think the next step is to either create a boot floppy or create a boot image for a hard disk. Right, so now we know the system seems to be working fine. We haven't actually booted it yet, but I'm sure it's fine. I've done a few little bits off camera. I've reinstated the battery holder. That's moreover because I wanted to use this temporarily, this battery, and I just thought it looked more original to have it in place, so that's gone back in. I've started routing some wires for the replacement for the battery, so the CR2032, instead of going in here as I originally said, I'm actually going to mount it underneath here, so it's actually not visible. So I've started routing a wire here through the fan and then out this side onto a little connector. I've got the other half of it just here. This will get mounted to the underside of the PCB to where the battery terminals connect through, and then that can just plug into here and also allow this to be completely removable as it currently is. The other thing that I've done as well is I've mounted the SCSI-to-SD adapter. So I bought a 2.5-inch hard disk to 3.5-inch adapter plate, so that's just been mounted on the standard Apple carrier. So that's all ready to go in. It's unprogrammed as yet, so we'll need to set up a new drive on there, and I also have a SD card to go in that. Okay, so you can see what I've done here. I've just soldered the coin holder onto those wires that come out to this little connector here. So I'm just going to hot glue this into here, which should mean that from the other side you can barely see it, so that should work really quite well. Okay, so I've got that all glued in place. That is pretty neat there. So the battery can just pop into there. This cable will come out, it'll be roughly about here somewhere, so that will disappear under the PCB and plug into there. Also taking the opportunity to glue down that big capacitor that was there before, and just glue down this wire and make it nice and secure. Right, so the SCSI-to-SD adapter is in place. It's all snapped in nicely. Next task is to make a new cable, because I don't want to use adapter cables on these. It'll just get long and look messy. So I'm actually going to make up a new cable to go from this this connector here to the SCSI-to-SD. So, right, so we need to make a new power cable for the SCSI-to-SD adapter. The original one just has a standard Molex connector on, which isn't going to work for us. I could use one of these floppy drive adapter cables, but yeah, it's not very neat. So what I've also purchased is one of these ATX auxiliary power extension cables, which has the right plug on this end. So what I just need to do is take this and solder those wires up to there and make a cable so it goes from one of these to the floppy drive power cable. So it should be a pretty easy job to do that. Right, so after a bit of fiddling around, I've copied this cable and made up this one. So that should just plug straight into the board and connect to the SCSI-to-SD adapter. Right, so now we've done most of the hardware modifications, we just need to give the keyboard and mouse a good clean so we can actually use them and get all the operating system set up. So it's a cleaning job, this one. So what I'm going to do, pull the mouse apart, we'll get all the insides out and give it a really good clean. We'll clean up this wire as well. That's pretty grimy. We'll also do the same to the keyboard. We'll take this apart, probably pull off all the keycaps and give those a good clean. I'm not going to go down the route of retro brighting. It's not something I've really got involved with, and it's not something I want to start. I think if the owner of this really fancies doing some retro brighting, then I'll leave it up to them, but that's not something I'm going to tackle. I don't really have the bits for it anyway, you know, UV lamps and all that sort of stuff, so it'll just be a straight cleaning up job. Now we can see the inside of the mouse. Interesting, the rather large IC there just to drive the mouse. It's incredible. Yeah, just a standard optical encoder mouse with a ball. So let's pop the circuit board out and we can give all the plastics a bit of a clean. Right, so that's the mechanism cleaned up a little bit, and I've also improved the cable considerably. It's actually grey now and not black. And yeah, if you want proof, there it is. How many years of grime. Okay, that's the mouse all cleaned up. Just took that apart and cleaned it with a old toothbrush and some soap and water. That starts to come up quite a few shades. Still a little bit yellow, probably do with a retro bright, to be honest, but as I said, I'm going to leave that for the owner. It's not something that I've ever really got into. More the electronics restoration rather than the cases and stuff, so I'll leave that one. The ball has come up a bit more sticky, not quite as shiny as it was, so hopefully that'll track a little bit better. So the next thing to do is just reassemble it. Okay, that's done. Now we need to have a look at the keyboard. Yeah, not too bad in there. It's a little bit grimy, but I think that's going to clean up just fine. That looks like, to me, like that was water damage. Yeah, that looks very much like there's been water on this. It looks like there's little patches where there's been water. The keyboard does work as far as I know. I've not tested every single key. So obviously we can't take this completely apart because it's actually all been heat staked, so we'll only be able to separate this to a certain degree, and what we'll do, we'll pop off all the key tops and give those a clean separately, and then we'll reassemble, give it a good clean up around the edges once the keys are off, and hopefully that will be enough. Okay, that's all the key tops off, so now we've got the long and horrible task of cleaning them all. Oh well. Right, so I've got all the keycaps cleaned up. Those will come up pretty nice. Some are a little bit yellow, but considering its age, it's not done too bad really. I'm going to give the keyboard here a bit of a clean. I'll give that a hoover first, get the dust off it, and then we'll give it a clean, reassemble it, and then we can fire this Mac up and finally get the operating system installed. Okay, so we've got the mouse and keyboard all cleaned up, so time to plug this in and start having a play. Right, to get this Mac up and running, we're going to need to install an operating system. Now, obviously that is going to be either the original system software, which ran up to version 6 point something, let's have a look, 603, 608, something like that, and you've got Mac OS 7, and that runs up to 7.6. The owner of this would like it on Mac OS 7, so I've had a bit of a look round, and there's a ton of different ways of actually doing this. I could actually create floppy disks and actually install it off floppy, or I could install a hard disk image, and that is what I've decided to do, but I've not decided to use the ones off WinWorld PC. I found this other site here called savagetailor.com, and what he's done here is generate some hard disk images with macOS 755, which I think is pretty much the latest that's going to run on this hardware. He's also included a load of extra little utilities and stuff, so I think that might be a good option. The owner of this Mac can modify it as much as they like once they get hold of it, so this is just a good way to get the last operating system on it with some utilities, and it's all ready to go. So what I've done, I've downloaded his images here. So we have, yeah, it's just here. So you've either got System 608 or System 755. So I've just downloaded the 500 meg one. That's going to be more than plenty for a Mac LC. So I've just got that unzipped on my desktop. So I'm just going to write that to the SD card, the actual image. So I've got that here. So I've got the OS selected. Here is my source, so I'm just going to select the destination to be the 16 gig SD card. Now the other thing we need to do is configure the SCSI-to-SD adapter to recognise the virtual drive that we've created on this SD card, and we'll do that once this is finished. Right, so that is done. Okay, so we've written the image to the SD card. I've just plugged that into the SCSI-to-SD adapter. You can't see that because it's off camera. And I'm just going to plug in the SCSI-to-SD adapter into my PC. Now you can see here I've got the SCSI-to-SD utility here. So these are the settings that we're going to need to put on. So we've got the SCSI terminator that's turned on because this is effectively on the end of the drive chain. Host speed can be normal, these can be set to default. I've turned on SCSI-to mode because why not, it might improve the performance just a tiny little bit. On device 1, the SCSI ID is 0 because that's the normal boot drive. Device type is hard drive. Quirks mode is set to none. Now interesting, there is an Apple option in here, and what that does is does what I've done down here automatically, but I've done it manually just so I can show you and explain why. So the start sector is 0 on the SD card because we wrote that image right at the beginning of the drive, so we can turn on auto. Sector size is 512 because these hard disks are all 512 byte sector hard disks, and the sector count is the size of the file that we wrote to the SD card divided by 512. So that gives us a device size of 500 megabytes, and the vendor, I've set this to Seagate. Product ID is ST225N, revision 1. Now this is a particular quirk of certain Apples of this period because the partitioning software looks for very specific parameters in here. This was probably one of Apple's little tricks to lock down so you could only use particular types of hard disk. So we're emulating one of the very common Seagate hard disks that was used on these systems, which is a Seagate ST225, and that will allow you to partition it if you ever wanted to in the future. Because of the way we're writing this, it's actually not necessary because effectively we're partitioning it by copying this disk image on to the SD card anyway, but it might help in the future. So revision 1 and then just a random serial number. So if we write that to the SCSI2SD card, we should now be able to disconnect that, and we can connect this up. Okay, I've got this all plugged in. Got the keyboard and mouse just here off screen. Everything's plugged in, ready to go. So I've just got, like before, the video output is going into one of my video scalers, so I can display it on this PC monitor, because they do work at a bit of odd resolutions and not all monitors can display them. So I'm just using that to convert the video. So I'm going to turn this on the switch. Hopefully we will boot up. Come on. I know it takes a little bit of a time. Huh? Welcome to Macintosh. So it's in black and white, I think. Isn't that bit normally in colour? No, it seems to be colour. Right, so that boots up pretty quick. System software 755. Total memory 10 megabytes, which is correct, I think. Don't they have 2 meg on board RAM, and we've plugged in 2 sticks of 4 meg, so that would be right, I think. Have a look. On here. Yeah, there's plenty of stuff on here. Control panels. Well, there's not many there. So we're in 16 colour mode, so we could do 256 if we wanted to. It's a bit slow, isn't it? Oh well. Right, well, yeah, it all seems to be working just fine. I don't think I've got anything on here to test the keyboard. Would have been nice to go through and check every single key. So yeah, in all, it seems to have worked out pretty well. So now what I've got to do is put all the case back on this, and we're good to go. Right, so this has all turned out really well. I'm really quite happy with what we've managed to do here. So we went through and replaced the capacitors in the power supply, the surface mount ones on the motherboard. Thankfully, there wasn't too much damage at all on there from the leaking capacitors, so that's worked out really well. Really happy with the CR2032 battery replacement. You really can't see it at all, and it just looks like a completely stock system. With the battery holder here being unused, you could argue that you could create a fake dummy battery to go in here to make it look like it's actually still using the half AA battery in there. The install of the SCSI-to-SD adapter went pretty straightforward. Nice sympathetic modification there, doing away with the spinning disc. You know, those old SCSI 50-pin hard disks now are getting so rare and expensive on eBay that these are definitely the best option. And that doesn't require really any modification to the original hardware at all. I used the original mounting holes in the drive bracket there. The keyboard and mouse, they've come up pretty well. I think the mouse could do with a retro bright. And it'd be nice if the owner can source an original LC keyboard that would have gone along with this, rather than this later one from, I think it's from the mid to late 1990s. So a bit of a shame there, but I'm sure they'll be able to pick one up at some point. So yes, really happy with this, and it's certainly a really nice system to upgrade and work on. You need virtually no screwdrivers or anything to work on them. The boards are nice and small, plenty of spacing and room around the capacitors to do desoldering and replace those. So, and I hope you enjoyed watching the conversion and restoration of this. So I'm going to get this boxed up and I'll need to do the same repair work to the second one that I've got as well. So, but that won't be having the SCSI-to-SD adapter. It's basically going to be restore the power supply, the motherboard, and then that one will just be kept as a spare in case this one does develop any faults. Okay, thanks for watching everybody. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, like, share, subscribe, do all that great stuff, and I will see you on the next video. Bye for now.